Welcome to MAAClub Guest Live Talk Series. We have decided to start this year in 2022 our MAAClub Guest Live Talks with Sofia Hagen from HagenHinderdael. We are very excited actually to have this first interesting and inspiring talk with her. I met with Sofia almost 13 years ago. Our friendship goes really back, and she's one of our MAA friends, and we thank her many times for her support and inspiring work. Actually, I would like to first do, Sofia, a short introduction about you, and because it will be also interesting for our audience to get to know a bit in detail about your biography. Sofia, actually, before launching her own practice, she gained international experience in architecture and interior design in various prestigious firms, such as Hedderwick Studio, Bonpaspar, Design House Liberty, and Zaha Hadid Architects. She was also studied at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna with Zaha Hadid Studio, in Zaha Hadid Studio. Afterwards, it followed her by a traineeship at Oled Architects in Paris. Actually, for me, it's also so interesting to know that you had in your past experience getting to know so many different star architects and to work with them. I think it's really good also for young architects to know that there are these kind of opportunities for them. Actually, Sofia is an architect, but besides that, she is also a designer, and she co-founded her London-based studio, HagenHinderdael firm. And actually there with her partner Lisa Hinderdale, they are focused on the creative conception of the products and interactive installations mainly. But while they are doing this, they pursue a creative approach that explores the relationship of immersive art and biophilic design. They merge sustainable materials with traditional craftsmanship and innovative technology. They produce elements, feature installations, placemaking shapes that push the boundaries of engineering. As a creative and inspiring practice, beyond their conceptual visions, they are also fundamentally grounded in how to be earth-conscious designers of the future. I think this is really important. I think we should all really need to focus on it. And they always design the ethos of a circular economy in mind. From the business vision, where all installations are made up of products to allow for a conscious afterlife, to their research and development arm into how to integrate the latest technologies. Today we will see a lot of them. I like it. Yeah. And within their designs, their firm aims to inspire future generations into what we can do when we think out of the box and bring our narrative full circle. And putting all these on one side, Sofia, thank you very much that you joined us today. And my first question for you will be, how and why did you found HagenHinderdael? Could you please describe the path you followed in the last 2 decades after getting to know all these inspiring names and working with them closely? Please, welcome.
Thank you very much, Melike. Thanks a lot for having me. As we said earlier, it feels more like talking to a friend, catching up with a friend, because we go a long way. And 2 decades sounds horrible, kind of, but it's true, it's 2 decades. Mm-hmm. So as you mentioned earlier, I started quite big in terms of scale, but probably also in terms of name with Zaha Hadid Architects, where I studied and worked. So I studied at University of Applied Arts in Vienna in her studio, and then from there went to her studio in London, where I worked on huge projects where we also met. After that, I stayed in London and worked for smaller scale firms until I got to Design House Liberty, which is a very young company where I very quickly became design director. Because I mean, everyone there was about the same age, in their 30s. So it was very, very self-sustained. So you got a lot of responsibility quickly. And I was running a huge project in China for a few years, where I did the interior architecture mainly for a huge fashion company. And I think this is where I got the kind of transition happened from large scale architecture into the interiors. So especially on all the China projects, I've been commuting to China for like 3 years, pretty much every month. I was working on retail, hospitality design, and getting really into interior design, which I found very, very interesting throughout, because I didn't want to just do the big shell and core of architecture, but go more into details and have a variety of projects, which you can easier do when you go smaller scale. And you can see here on the images I'm sharing, it even went down to products. So this is a hotel in London where all the lights are bespoke. And that's where I actually worked very closely with Lisa, my now business partner, who is running the lighting company there. And we developed products, but also installations. So for all the projects, we started doing bespoke art installations, or like here for the Venice Biennale, this is an art installation which consists of products. So it's interactive, you can touch it and then it starts moving and the lights start blinking. And so we were both very interested in an approach of how can you combine the two. And then also going more into experiential design. This is one example for Bon Passin Par, where I was doing freelance jobs as basically 3D experience designer, designing their exhibition spaces, and they do very crazy projects, so you can really play. Or at least for me, I can play because I didn't have to worry about the budget. And it's also interesting, the learning curve. So the variety of practices to not just do architecture, but change the scales, change the people you work with, I think really forms you on the path for 2 decades, yeah. And I think from there then, I also decided at the end of 2019, okay, it's time to, you start forming your path, but also what you really want to do and your ethos. And at some point you just need to make the decision, okay, do I keep doing it for others, with others, or do I take the plunge? So I started HagenHinderdael in 2020, then halfway through Lisa joined me and we merged together. And yeah, that's how basically the rest is history. That's where we're now. Great timing to start during COVID.
Yes, I remember actually when you established your own firm with Lisa afterwards. It was just before the COVID-19 started. We had a talk and future plans together. Then, of course, like we all had a silence moments, but now we are all going quite intensely and working, and I know you will describe today us more into detail your developments in your firm. And while we entered your firm right now in your story, it would be also interesting to learn more about the design philosophy of HagenHinderdael. So how do you create your design and your products under this umbrella?
So, because as I mentioned before, we were interested from the start to combine installations with products. And this here it's not advanced fabrication, but that's the first project we did, which was an interactive installation for a developer in London. And it was meant to be temporary, like an urban forest bath where people could plant seeds and learn about the healthy natural environment and why it's so important for our well-being. And within London, it was super successful because people could actually, interact with gardens and soil. And it was launched just, 2020 during COVID. So everyone was super grateful. And we designed it to last, because even if it's an art installation, we're still more designers and architects than artists deep down. So it consisted of elements from reclaimed timber that can be repurposed. So now it stays there for good. And that was also, it's a very strong point within our ethos to be eco-conscious in a way of creating things that even if it's meant to be temporary and just a pop-up, created in a way that it can be used again or has a continuous afterlife for good. And another point is we're very context driven. So this was in Wembley Park for the Wembley Park Art Trail. Driving on the context and the history of the site, where we also created a garden within the phone booths, and they started growing wild over summer. So they've overgrown the whole booths. And afterwards, also all the plants got replanted, repurposed. Sadly, it couldn't stay on, but it lives somewhere else now. And speaking of context, this is an installation we did for Dubai Design Week, which is mimicking the skyline of Dubai. And that was the first project in 2020 where we got more into advanced technologies as well, because it's something we had done previously, I guess, during our practice as architects. But we collaborated with Concreative 3D Printing, which is a 3D printed concrete specialist based in Dubai. And we created those sculptural elements, which we then launched as a product. So they're now at Minotti London in the showroom. Whoever's in London can go visit. They come as planters and seats and stools in different sizes and heights. And you can turn them upside down. So it's a seat, or you turn it upside down and you have a planter. And the beauty with working with this is, like, it's another point of how can things be repurposed, right? It's not just art, but now it's a super high-end product and you put it in the right context. And we're using it in landscape design projects we're currently doing in London as well. So we're actually specifying our own products there. So it can continue and it can also trigger something. Or the other way around, you can turn this back into an art installation because they're very sculptural pieces. And that's also the beauty of 3D printing. You can create sculptures. So that's another one, which is a light we made of 3D printed sawdust, which brings me to another point of our eco-conscious approach. Apart from repurposing the product as such, from installation to product, we also work a lot with repurposing materials. So this light, the cocoon light, is made entirely of sawdust from construction and carpentry waste. And it's then bound together in a desk jet binder, printed with lignin, so there's no resin or chemicals. It's all natural, 100% wood-based, and it comes as a table light or a pendant and different finishes. So this is, on this image, you can see the natural sawdust finish. That's how it looks. We have now a few finishes available, so you can have it in the natural sawdust, where it's just like varnished, or in the darker walnut. So this was our light we started last year, and it's really exciting to experiment with those things because it doesn't exist yet. Like, that's the first 3D printed sawdust lamp.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And it's nice with, we also decided, you know, it's really, we got really into it once we got into the technology of printing, to not just print beautiful shapes and sculptures, but experiment with the materiality of things. Like, another example is the twine seat, which was launched in Milan Design Week for Rosanna Orlandi. It got finalists there in the Guiltless Plastic Prize. And this is a seat that consists entirely of medical plastic tray waste, which is then turned into 3D print filament and printed. And it's like modular seating, outdoor furniture, so you can turn it upside down, do different configurations. Super exciting for children. I was allowed to post them, so so we had it at the London Design Festival. After Milan, it toured to London at the LDF, and kids went crazy. So children get it, that it's meant to be a playful furniture piece, because they just go for it and start climbing and sliding. And that's really beautiful when you see the reaction, you know, that, yeah, you know, this is what you're meant to do with it. And again, with the materiality, I think that's also something that kind of triggers the kids to play, but also the adults. The plastic is translucent, as you can see here. So you see the structure, it has different transparencies, opacities, depending how the light shines through, and it catches its surroundings too. So also completely different approach to the cocoon or the nacre concrete elements again. And another way of sustainable material thinking is the Bola lamp, which is also an experiment. So all the products are quite experimental, as you can tell, I guess. This one is handmade, and it's made concrete cast in bubble wrap. So you can see the texture. It's the negative form of the bubble wrap, which is part of the mold, and it's also packaging waste. So we have a mix of concrete, and then it's all using waste material and repurposing it into a high-end product.
Beautiful.
And we're really into, and you know, it's also nice to show that you can use waste and turn it into something that like looks still stunning in a Knightsbridge mansion, like on these photos here. So that's a very strong point within our ethos and narrative, and also collaboration. Like there's quite a variety of suppliers we work with and countries. Like every example I gave you is basically different countries because of where they're fabricated and because of the research. And this one here is in Austria, where I'm actually from, and that's launching next week. So this is a collaboration with a local supplier in Austria, which you can see the mountains in the background is inspired by the mountain range. And it's 2 seats which can fit into each other, the mom and the baby, basically. And yeah, in a week's time, it will be launched at the Vorarlberger Architekturinstitut, and it will be up there until end of June. And we already have big plans ahead for it, which I can share later. Yeah, so
inspiring, really, all of them.
Yeah, so if that's in a nutshell, a big nutshell, like the repurposing, experimenting with materiality, and collaboration are like our strongest points within our ethos.
Very inspiring, all of them, like in different scales and different materials, and using the waste and really redefining what is luxury. And I think these are all very important subject and ecos that we all need to think about. And creating, at the end, you turn them into really inspiring designs and art pieces in a way. Like they are furnitures, some of them, or products, but they become also, they include in themselves the touch of the design quality, and even they can individually become kind of a sculpture. That's why I like it. But when they are doing it, the materiality and the sustainability worries you include into them, they are really important for the future of at the end of the future of humanity. So when you are designing all these inspiring products, or in any scale, actually, also for the interior designs, like in different scales, also the architecture projects you worked on, I would like to know, where do you get your inspiration? Usually they also ask me this question, so that's why I would like to know also your point of view. Where does it stay, or how do you get influence to develop these each time with a new approach? But there are certain things that they remain as a DNA. I see that in each design you do, but of course as a shape or as a language they might change. So please share with us what is the secret.
So it's unique for each one. I mean, I guess what they all have in common is we're really into material research, which is one point of inspiration, because every material has different qualities and constraints and the technology that comes with it. But that's the technical side. And in terms of the formality, it's quite unique and project driven. Like the contour seat here is inspired by the mountainscapes, because it was made for a show in the west of Austria, in the Alps, and it will go into public realm all over there. So it has to be something that corresponds. And I think this is where architect thinking comes into it, working with the surrounding context. And it doesn't matter if it's a building or a bench, you still think with the context in mind and the history around it. And that's what shapes your outcome. Or good with the bolla, that's a tower within itself. But even within the twine seat, for example, the inspiration was, okay, the brief was meant to be playful furniture, playful outdoor furniture. So we started to play with shapes, literally. So it's a very impulsive approach in that respect. It's a combination of context research combined with an impulse of how do people interact and play, what would people do? And that's what people would do. So we want to climb, we want to slide, we want to crawl underneath it. And apparently it was a success with this. Or with the cocoon lamp, we always wanted, because we're very inspired by nature, like with the mountainscapes, but also generally natures. But I guess it goes hand in hand with the organic shapes we create, which is also easy to create with printing. When you can print and use robotic fabrication, like go wild, because create shapes that can't be made in any other way. So nature gives you all those geometries that can inspire your work. And the cocoon is very much inspired by like cocoons and nuts and shells in the jungle, where we tried all sorts of typologies and forms, and it can still grow from here, in terms of, you know, we can easily make bespoke lights that are a different type of nut or a different type of cocoon. So I guess it's the, yeah, quite long answer to your question, but probably a blend of the materiality, the context, and yeah, what nature can give us.
Yes, and they all include on one side perfection, but also on other side they include imperfection in it. With the technology, you know, you choose to innovate, to manufacture them. I also like that you combine these things together in a very creative way. And also these last sofas that you shared recently, I find them really also functional in a way, like okay, they get their context from the surrounding, but at the same time it looks like I would like to sit and lay on it. You know, like it gives me, I want to touch them and I want to really get in contact with these things, like the kids do. In your images, what we see, they find it really playful. I think that's really also interesting touch at that point. And while you were presenting, I was also thinking about the fact that because you are constantly also talking about materials, using the waste in a way, using them in a different way. And at the same time, it looks like you are trying to produce, in a way, answers or questions for the current global problems. And you are, in a way, starting from these small scale product designs, in a way you are raising awareness for people. Because when you talk about it, when you explain the story about your design and the product, because then anyone will look at it in a different, with a different layer of awareness. And at this point, that I would like to ask you, like, at what point do these social and global issues become important for you when you start designing this project? Like, there was a kind of a starting point for you, or it would be nice to hear from your point of view.
Pretty much from the start. It's even when we started the practice, like with the project I showed in the very beginning, the Eden with the urban forest bath. I mean, okay, there the brief was sustainability, but there can be anything, and everyone uses sustainability.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean anything anymore, almost. But I guess for us, it was always because we had the idea that we want to work with installations that can be repurposed down to every detail, down to the material that you're using. And, you know, how can you repurpose every single bit of the design? Because in a way, as soon as you start designing and making things, you're already contributing to pollution, waste, carbon footprint, etc. It's like we should all stop making stuff, is the reality if we want to change. But that's not human, right? We need innovation and we need culture and we need to create. So in order to pair that and maybe, you know, justify what we do as a job and as a passion, we're trying to solve it by using innovation and research in terms of how can we make it better. If we really have to do something, how can we at least create it that it has the least impact and can be the most earth conscious and eco-friendly. And it's also really much more exciting because we're a young brand. We can experiment. All the companies I showed you now, the different manufacturers, they're also very young. It's like AI Build, who are based in London, who made the twine seat, and they are like 6 years old. They're ex-Zaha as well.
Yeah, I know them.
Yeah, you know them.
Yes, definitely.
Turkish Greek boys, and
Yes.
so they're super vibrant and, you know, up for any experiment. And when they took on the twine seed, for them it was like an experiment as such, but I get to that later. But also down to the, you know, finding the collaborators that you work with who are out there is more interesting if you're looking for their innovative approach, and you start finding out more and more things who, you know, once you're in that niche, they start introducing you to others, like Reflow, the material supplier who got the medical plastic waste, who's sourcing that. And it's all very geeky niche, but it starts growing from there. And I think it's quite a network that's growing now. So I can see once you're in it, you can see that we're already forming the future within this network. And it's still in its infancy now, but it's becoming more and more. And still you want to combine it with craftsmanship and tradition, like the cocoon is hand finished after, but you know, at least do it in a way that's not as intrusive as most traditional methodologies were.
Really important things.
Yeah.
I really find it very important for many people to really understand this and be aware of this, definitely. And maybe my next question might be a little bit more about understanding the techniques, because you rediscover, you reinvent, and your source of inspiration is actually comes from nature itself. And then you create interesting relationships between the physical and also the virtual in some sense, because you use different technologies, digital technologies, or digital manufacturing methodologies you involve during your, as you were describing just before. So your 3D print products, either plastic or concrete, or like different also 3D print materials you use. So what kind of techniques, I mean, you described it actually, but it would be also good to know a little bit more into details while you are designing these products in your journey between these virtual and physical worlds, where the boundaries are blurred for you, or how are they combined or melted each other? It would be.
I think that's a good point, that the boundaries are blurred, because all the products you saw when they're printed, like they looked like this on the screen, just maybe, okay, I didn't render them as well, so I didn't show all the textures you can see here, but the shapes are, you make the shape and then it gets printed out. You might need a few amendments, but it's quite beautiful to see this, like, you almost feel like you're part of the process, like a craftsman, but slightly extended, and you can influence it easily as well. But then going to the technology, I mean, one reason why we got into printing, this is how Nacre was made for Dubai Design Week in 2020, also has to do with COVID, because we started during lockdown. I mean, everything was shut. Great timing. So all workshops, manufacturers were shut, or, you know, who knows when they will open and if, but robots could work. So that was like, well, one very fair point. Let's start making something. And for one, okay, it's the machine technology. Robots could still work. So the ABB ones are usually used for concrete or clay printing as well, which we're going to look at later down the line this year. But at the same time, so an aspect of it, when you use the robots or advanced technology in printing, you actually generate less waste, because you don't need any molds for the concrete, for example. You don't create any waste product for like substructures, etc. The structure is the thing. So whatever you print already contains, like you can see on the Nacre piece here, the structure is part of the model. Like once you're modeling it in 3D, it's self-supporting. So you can do everything with one material, which also contributes obviously to a more eco-friendly approach. And that's probably also justifying how we can use concrete, that if you want to work with concrete, which is usually the evil, if you print it, at least you save on so much more waste material. And also the aggregate of it, for printing, you need the perfect mix. So the paste is perfect. So on the left side on the image, you can see plastic waste that we're using as an aggregate to reduce the cement amount. And you can experiment with different mixtures, or the image on the right side shows for contour the gradients that then also happen. So adding different pigments, and then the machine squirts them out as it goes along. So each piece is unique and has a different gradient. Another part where it comes in handy is weight testing. let's say it holds not just the weight of one man, but
Nice.
about 650 kilo. So we did go from the printing, the materials research. The next step is then actually get a bit hands-on and see if it really works. Because while you're printing, like with contour, we were quite lucky actually, because you can see all those little layers within, which is the substructure, which makes it self-supportive. So you don't need additional structure. Okay, then will it actually print it all right? Will it fall apart while printing, while it's drying? Because there's certain steps to the printing process too. It ticked all those boxes, and now can it carry the weight? And yeah, okay, there's the guy, but you know, he's not that big. So we started doing weight tests and just throwing cement bags onto it. And there's a video of it, but it's like a 5-minute long video until it finally breaks at around 650 kilos. So I think it should be okay. Yeah, and then it's ready to go. And you can see here on those photos as well, you know, the different shades of gray within, because we like to add an element of surprise to it. So it's not just perfect machine made. It's like I said, I couldn't render it that perfectly. I mean, I guess I could, but it's also boring, right?
Yes.
So even if the printer prints your perfect model, it's nice to give it one more layer of craft and one more layer of an accident that happens throughout.
Yes.
So here we have the pigmentation, which will make each piece unique. And with the twine seed, so I guess Michael and Dagan can tell you more about the challenges and the joys. It's a completely different process. I mean, okay, we modeled it the same way, right? But the thickness of the material, you know, it's so much more refined than especially with twine. The difficulty is we wanted it to be double curved in each direction. So MAAGuests had to completely reconfigure their software, because they usually do software engineering for the robots. And they took this project on because they found it exciting and a challenge to create something that's not just a straight extrusion, but it's actually double curved. So they had to build a mold. They printed a mold first, printed it onto the mold, and they were quite quick. They had it within 2 weeks. They had it figured out, which is also faster than traditional methodologies. But I don't think it, yeah, I think it gave them lots of headaches, which they scared us with. But you can see also the examples of, you know, the structure that's built within. It all comes out in one print magically. And I mean, a few problems here were, apart from creating the right mold, making sure they've never printed like this before, to print on the curved mold, the drying times of the material. You need to keep it hot, because either it starts melting or it starts cracking when it cools down too quickly. So there's all those things. Accidents happen also with robotic fabrication. And the cocoon light, here it's in the oven, or actually fresh out of the oven, in its natural sawdust. So you can actually see in the texture here the sawdust. The constraints were the size of the printer, because that's done with a different technology. It's not like a large-scale robot like the others, but it's a desk jet binder. So it binds the powder, and the lignin, which forms the glue, basically glues it together, and then you carve it out of the powder, basically. And we had to print it in, split it in pieces. There were lots of studies involved how to actually get that whole shape, because there are certain sizes to the printers and parameters that you have to stick to. So it's still a lot of handmade experimentation involved even there, down to the hand staining it. So the stains we use here are also biodegradable and organic, just to make sure we're not suddenly poisoning it. We're going all the way, yeah, it's so sustainable, and then chemical. Yeah, that's
actually, I can maybe ask additional question related to this subject. Like when you are doing this manufacturing process, of course, like the companies you work with, they have know-how, and but maybe they have kind of know-how. Sometimes they cannot directly answer your design question. I mean, qualifications. As AI built it, they need to re-examine either their software or something to rerun the whole process. But during these things, but because you were also mentioning in detail that the design and structure are together. So while you are designing, actually structurally also you are building it together. During these times, do you need to get any collaboration from a structural engineer or to get any feedback from them? You know, is it because I see that you are using actually triangular in a way truss system inside this, or in the other sofa, the concrete print, you had in certain locations you had connections like bundling points. That's what I see. So they create in a way designed trust system in some house. But did you get any feedback from a structural engineer, or are there people who can answer such questions for your scale, especially for this scale of work?
We do, like for example with this here, because this is supposed to go into public realm, that's why we did those weight tests with the cement, but we also did speak to structural engineers. So usually while we're printing, it's the same actually with the contour as well as with the twine. The structure is being tested while it's being printed, or as soon as it's ready, you can already tell, is it self-supportive at least? Does it fall apart or not? And so far we've only done self-tests, but thanks to our, past life as architects, we
experience,
we also have contacts to engineers. So when a certificate is needed, then that's no problem to obtain. But at the moment with those two examples here, it was completely sufficient to just do the test manually and with, by doing, see how much it can. But we're also adding that to our warranty. I mean, it's similar with the light, all the lights need certificates because it's electric. So actually one thing I didn't mention earlier, all of our lights use Oled as a light source, which is usually used in TVs and cars. Audi uses them, and they do them as lights, but mostly not in decorative lighting because they're like a certain size. So you have to work your lamp around the light source.
Yes, that's awesome.
It's not just the bulb, and people can't really replace it themselves. It's all one thing that we have to work with in the fitting. Same like here with the structure, it's part of the design. With the lights, the light source is also fitted within as part of the design and the electrics. So there we have to work with electricians, obviously, to get that approved and certified so we can safely send it out to people without them exploding. But OLEDs last 10 times longer than LEDs. So usually people in their lifetime should not have to ever change the bulb because they
are lucky when they get your product.
Yeah, exactly. It lasts forever, which also goes with the whole circular economy approach. It's not just about repurposing, but making it last. So you don't have to constantly redo something new, right?
Definitely. And so maybe, my next question will be, I mean, not all the time everything is very happy or very good and everything is going along, perfectly. I am sure you have also certain problems you experience during the design, either design processes, or you may have other challenges which you are trying to overcome during all these times. And if there are such things, how do you deal with them? Or would you like to mention a little bit about the challenges you go through during this whole story?
Yeah, so nothing's always perfect. I mean, with the cocoon, for example, the challenge was a technical one because the company, they're called Forest, based in the US, they have only ever done tiny bowls or elements. They've never done something, and cocoon is quite big. It's like 45 centimeters. So their printers have never produced anything that tall. And we had to do so many remodeling and making it work. And I mean, the biggest pain was probably on the manufacturer's side more than on ours in that case. But they did a really good job to make it work. And I can't give away the industry secrets how, but they did. With Twine, I think similar. It was mainly AI built who had the headache of how can we get this out without it like breaking, falling apart. What tool paths? It was quite a challenge for them, but that's why they also took on the project. And our biggest issue was, because like for us it was quite easy. We did the model, sent it, and they were amazing. They took our model and printed it, like, you know, just perfect. But that's more of a logistical issue we faced, was that we sent it to Milan. It was showcased Milan Design Week, amazing. Well, Brexit. So apart from the COVID issue that brought us to print in the first place, there was also the Brexit issue, which makes logistics so hard. And that's more of a like, business related issue rather than, but it's also part of the process because you need to bring your goods back and forth, right? Or do shows and exhibitions. And like the Twine seat that was showcased in Milan is now the one that was actually in Italy stayed in Europe. So it's in Austria, in my home, and it now tours and is going to be in the show where we're launching Contour as well next week. So yeah, it lives on. So we now have to produce always a batch for the UK and one batch for Europe to make it viable.
Some political issues becomes also one of the challenges.
Not just in architecture, it's also, I thought, after architecture, I won't have those politics anymore. You do.
When you're in the business, definitely there are, you feel the boundaries. And maybe we can go to some a bit more like to the public, and what I'm trying to say, actually you were showing also from your exhibitions, also you do some of the exhibitions in outdoors as installations, like in public plazas or in public spaces. You have also many designs, and I always wonder, because sometimes we also get invited, and each time we get, from our point of view, at least, I find it really important and really inspiring also, because as a designer, you have a certain aim and certain ideology when you design, and then when you place it in a public place, and then you go far, and then it starts talking by itself. Your installation. So I would, because in your designs, like you have such important underlined also ethos inside them. So I would like to know, like, what kind of reactions you get from public. We understand that the kids love it, but besides that, like, how do they react when they see these different products, like with different material, with a different design language? Like many things are different than, especially in London. Like I can imagine in, we all know London and their the city life there. Suddenly when you walk in these narrow streets, and then between the brick walls, and suddenly you see one of these 3D printed concrete lighting elements standing in the middle of in a plaza. So how are the reactions? Like what people they say, what kind of feedbacks you get from them?
Usually, I must say adults like it too.
I can imagine.
More shy, but not actually always more shy than the children. So everyone wants to touch them, no matter which product. I think it's because of the shape of it, because it's so round and organic. Everyone goes for it and wants to immediately touch it, and they're curious, like, what is it? I mean, with the Twine here, for example, a lot of people just, sometimes you have to explain it's a bench, you can sit on it. At least the cocoon glows, so you can switch it on off, then they know it's a light. But also when we have cocoon, like in the previous, I'm gonna just jump a little bit, previous images, we have it as a pendant, but also as a table light, right? When it's not switched on, like it looks like a sculpture. So a lot of people go and think it's just an artistic sculpture. So it's quite nice. Each product gets completely different reactions from people, and especially in the public realm, because that's when you get the variety of people. And we've had it at London Design Festival, in Milan. We were on a few shows in London where public could access all the different products. And I think in unison, first of all, they're intrigued by the shapes, by the like, what is it actually? And when they then find out about the story or start touching, they're like, no way, like people hardly believe that's sawdust, that's printed. Or with twine, they often think it's made of glass, and you tell them, no, it's medical plastic tray waste, etc., etc. So, or with the contour seat, because the problem with the concrete is it's rough, right? I mean, you can see also on the bolla, but usually printed concrete has this rough textured surface. So we actually treated it in a way that it has a smooth surface. So it's still, you see the texture, but you don't feel it. So it won't rip your tights or skin. And that's an important aspect too, because here it's inviting for people to lounge around on it and play with it, but you need to make it safe for them too. But we've had, everyone has their favorites as well, you can see from people. And also their favorite constellation, how they combine the elements together. We let them play with it as well, because you can put it together in different ways. How they use it, how they sit on it. And that's really beautiful to see that not just the children, but even the adults, when they're, you tell them you can't touch it. They actually do it.
Exactly. Yes.
It's fine. I mean, okay, that's like, one challenge we had at LDF, we invited them a little bit too much to touch. We had the cocoon pendant and they actually ripped it off.
Oh my God.
That's like the nightmare you don't want to have while you're at the show. You're like, fine. But you can fix everything. So as long as you can.
But it's interesting. They sometimes they get too much curious.
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes, okay, maybe not.
Yeah, but this touching thing is very human thing, and I think it's very important. So that includes the discovery and the research, like the person by itself wants to really discover what's happening there. Maybe you are not there, and by touching, trying to understand and solve questions they have in their mind. I find it really interesting to observe also. Maybe you should also, next time you can put a camera and to record, like,
that's true,
how they are, like how much they stand. It could be really interesting analytics for you, like it can come to analyze the behaviors of the visitors. Actually, we are coming towards the last question. At last, I would like to ask you, what are your future plans? I mean, it's a very generic question, but maybe you have some dreams about future or some wishes, or maybe a very close future, you may have some near future, some plans. It would be nice to hear before actually we end our session. Before, of course, we will also have time for questions. If there are any questions from our audience, we can answer them. So what are your future plans, Sofia?
So the nearest future, we're launching Contour next week.
Yes.
So we're going to Austria now, setting up the show, launching Contour, and also we have quite a tour this year of like Austria, Germany, Switzerland, conquering Europe slowly in a friendly way with our products. And it's all based around robotics. So there's lots of events and series. And once people find out that you're in that niche, like it starts spreading, because it's also a small world and you realize we all somehow know each other or work with the same robots. So there's going to be, in that respect, a lot of events planned on robotic fabrication and eco-conscious design, and not just in London, but in several countries in Europe, which we have lined up. And then we're developing a new product which got commissioned by a developer here in London. It's confidential, so I can't say who, but very big. Oh, the product is tiny, but the developer is big. And for this, we're working with Reflow again, who sourced the material for twine. and we're going to use 3D printed hemp mixed with recycled PLA, and the material is still being developed. So it's like it's going to be the first product out there made with that particular material of natural fibers and waste material mix. And that's going to launch in summer together with the development where it goes into. And then, well, we do landscape design projects quite a bit. I think we got into them because of the installations and the nature of the furniture we do. They lend themselves to outdoor furniture. So that's kind of ongoing. And we're always looking for what new materials are out there, what's the new technology, what other suppliers and collaborators can we find. So we're already talking now about collaborations for like end of year or next year or the many years to come. And very often those things just happen through a conversation or because you're at the right place somewhere. So a lot of it, I think, will happen where we don't even know quite yet the scale of, but we'll keep pushing and we'll keep researching and keep making.
Yes.
Basically.
I think that's already enough for future plans. More than enough. Actually, there are 3 questions we picked up, and I think we can ask you these questions from our audience. One of them comes from young designers. Actually, they ask, do you provide internship for students in your studio? If they want to apply, do you give such opportunity to them? They would like to know if there's such opportunity.
We're open to also work with others because it's really important. Like collaboration gives you just more ideas, right? At the moment, is that they can just reach out to us directly and email us, and then we can start the conversation.
Okay.
Going. Yes.
So they will check your email from your website, and then they can contact you whoever is interested. And the other question is actually, maybe you already answered this, but let's ask again. What is the material which you would like to use next, like as a different material they are asking, because you already tested certain materials. What is the next one for you?
So the one we're now testing is the hemp PLA. And then we also really want to go into clay. So we're speaking to people in Austria who are also part of this show who want to start a new product, and they're really into clay. So actually our mutual friend Yelda.
Yes, she's really good in this. She's doing her studies about it.
So we're looking at collaborating with her, and Yelda doesn't even, I mean, she knows about it, but just shouting her out there now as well. I hope it's okay. But that's definitely a next development we want to look into, because I mean, concrete, it's beautiful, but it would be better if you can do it also with clay, which is a bit more eco-conscious. And then, especially by working with Reflow, they have so many materials up, like in the pipeline that they're still developing. So I think once a project comes along, we usually then tell our clients, look, you could make it from this, 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 or this. Shall we try? And then, like with the developer now, when they're up for it, then there's rubber, there's carbon, like there's so much out there that you can reuse, fish nets. So
interesting, all of them. Hopefully we will get chance to try one of them with you. And the last question, actually, in a way, it's also related to collaborations. Let's say if an architect, or probably whoever is asking is an architect, if an architect contacts you, how much, I mean, for a product, but maybe not in your catalog, but for a new product, how much time do you think it takes from design to manufacturing, like more or less the development for a project based, let's say? That's what I understand from the question.
I think that depends a lot on the material and fabrication, because each of the manufacturers we work with have different lead times. Or, for example, if the material exists already, like with the sawdust, we know it will probably take like a few weeks up to a month. But it's also, it's like quite a moving target. In general, I think the ideal, it's safest to say 2 to 3 months of development, but it can vary depending, because if we're using a new material that isn't quite tested yet, it might take longer because there's still experimentation involved. If it's a tried and tested material like the contour seat, it can be done within a week because we know the design is there. But for bespoke designs, there's obviously the design time involved. There's the coordination. We definitely do bespoke commissions and we can design very quickly. But then it's easier to answer the question in which material would you like to work in? And then we can get back with a more detailed reply. But it's nice with, you know, the whole printing, you can so easily make different versions of it. And when you have the relationships with all the suppliers and manufacturers, it's a much faster project. It's like with architecture, with the contractors, right? Once you know each other, it goes smoothly.
Of course, yeah. Okay, so Sofia, thank you very much for this really fruitful and wonderful talk you had with us today. We are really thankful to you, and we are looking forward to be in collaboration with you as MAA. And,
thank you so much. We're very excited too. Next time with Lisa.
Yes, definitely. We send our greetings also to her, and we are looking forward to meet also in person as soon as possible with both of you, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.